A study performed on US soldiers returning from Iraq found that 87 reported some level of hearing disturbance, 75% reported tinnitus, a constant ringing in their ears,
Oh my
and
God.
that 50% had substantial hearing loss compared to peers their age. The issue is even
I know there are worse things, but can you imagine that you have, for example, you have PTSD already, you went through all of this, and you also have tinnitus on top of that?
Hello guys,
Hi everyone,
I am Waldemar,
and I'm Weronika.
and today another kind of historical video,
Mm-hmm.
not a stand-up finally. It's called War Myths You Believe Because of the Movies.
Yeah, and it's by this
it's
guy from
another-
Sideprojects, I think.
Yeah, I want to say, this guy again, the
Yeah.
bald guy with the beard, which has like 7 channels or something.
Yeah, he has 2, I think. Yeah,
Only 2, I think more, because
I think 2 and 1 is like guest appearance kind of thing that he does, but I'm not so sure.
maybe. What is this channel called?
Sideprojects.
Sideprojects, okay. Yeah, the guy has a pretty interesting videos.
Mm-hmm. We had the ancient mysteries from him, and something else about America. I don't remember, but like controversial things. I don't know. What are you doing with your head?
Every time I'm doing this for like a couple of months. Every time I'm trying to tell you that
Yeah, but
you
I
need
don't
to
know.
move a bit further from the microphone
Okay.
because they cannot hear you if you are
I think they can hear it
too
perfectly well.
close to me. So now you know I'm always like,
Yeah, it
move
was
back,
not very subtle.
move back.
It was just you look just
And
look
she's
very
always
strange.
like, huh? Huh?
Especially because you're doing that, you're moving your mouth away from them. I don't know. Okay, so yes, he has very good videos. We like the ones that we've seen before, and we've seen him before. He had the glow up with the new channel and look and everything.
It was after the monetization.
Yeah, I think so. I think it must have been pretty nice monetization because now he looks really cool.
Yeah, video about war myths. Do you think you know any? What do you expect to see in this video?
I don't know, something about violence or guns or like how epic something is, and then it not being that epic in the end. That's kind of the idea that I have in my head.
Yeah, I was thinking about it, not for so long, just when from the start of this video, and yeah,
So for like the last 2 minutes, 25 seconds.
yes, and I don't know, I know some myths like related to guns, for example, that the silencers
Yeah.
are not working like they work in the movies. They are not so silent. You know that, right?
Yeah, I know that.
But when it comes to war myths, I must say I don't know what to expect. But if there will be some that I knew before, then I will let you know. I hope I will be surprised. And I will be like, what? That's not true? What about Saving Private Ryan? Was it not true?
Let's check.
Tom Hanks lied to me.
Movies have been a staple of cinema since its inception, and over the decades, they've raked in billions of dollars at the box office with hits like Saving Private Ryan and Dunkirk, making hundreds of millions on their own worldwide. But as well made as many of these films can be, the constraints of making war movies viewable and entertaining to an audience often leads to more than a few inaccurate
I think our lamps just fall down.
Yeah, I think that's not gonna take away from the quality of the video. We should just go on, but oh well.
It happens.
But the dog has not been hurt in the falling of the lamps.
No dogs have been harmed
Harmed
in
the
making of this video.
accuracies in their portrayal. Today, we're going to set the record straight. One of the most common myths, especially in depictions of the World Wars, is the idea that the majority of combat consisted of gunfights between individual soldiers or even hand-to-hand combat as waves of soldiers rushed enemy trenches. Make no mistake, this was definitely a large aspect of the fighting, but it pushes aside
Of
the
the First
immense
World War,
role
I
that
think.
artillery played in many of these conflicts. Oftentimes, artillery is depicted as a sort of background noise, a constant booming that kicks up dirt around the trenches while the troops and the main character charge forward. In reality, the unreal thundering of a true artillery barrage would have dwarfed everything else in sight, and in many instances, artillery was actually responsible for more deaths than anything else. Take, for instance, the Battle of the Don, the longest and arguably most famous battle of the First World War, fought between the Germans and the French on the Western Front. In total, there were about 800,000 casualties. Certainly a staggering number of deaths and injuries from just a single battle, but what's less known is that an estimated 70% of all of those casualties were from artillery
70%?
alone.
Yeah,
In their
I
opening
believe.
I didn't know
bombardment, the
that.
Germans fired an unbelievable 2 million shells, and over the course of the next 10 months, each side would exchange roughly 50 million more. It's completely understandable why most movies don't do much to show the true scale of artillery, as they'd much rather focus on characters and interesting action scenes instead of 12 straight hours of heavy shelling, but the point still stands. And it's not just depictions of World War I that are guilty of brushing artillery aside, but also World War II. Movies featuring the Allies versus the Axis, some of the most common war films out there, but in general they also fail to show the power of artillery, and suffice to say, this was a war with some major bombardments. In fact, it contained what is regarded as the largest artillery bombardment of all time. When the Soviets had reached the German defences dubbed the Gates of Berlin, centred around the city silo, they prepared one of history's largest barrages to pave their way for soldiers. Lined up across a front line of more than 18 miles long, the Soviets showed up with more than 9,000 artillery guns, which comes out to about a gun placed every 11 feet. When given the order to fire, around 500,000 shells were blasted at the German lines in just 30 minutes. This absolutely obliterated everything in their way. Though it must be noted that this specific bombardment wasn't as effective as it could have been because the Germans had grown accustomed to the Soviet reliance on artillery across the Eastern Front and had already moved much of their men and equipment out of the way. But the fact that the Soviets were so reliant on it that the Germans had to adapt just drives home the point that artillery was the true backbone of many operations and continues to be underdepicted in modern movies.
And it still is, from what I heard when about the war in Ukraine. The artillery is very, very important, and it proved to be more important than people thought it is. Like nowadays, there was this opinion that the extra technologically advanced planes and
drones and stuff.
Yeah, stuff like that will be the most important, and they are, of course. But the artillery is still the thing, like the HIMARS or HIMARS, the artillery.
Mm-hmm.
The one that Ukraine got from United States.
Yeah.
Not only from, they are being made in United States, but I
not
think,
only funded by them. I think.
I think it was funded by Europe and United States, and they were like devastating for Russians.
I heard about it.
Like he said, they won't allow the troops to move so much because there is this constant
a wall that you cannot cross.
But I had no idea about the numbers. Can
70%,
you imagine?
That's just really
but also the numbers of the shells that they were able to hit. Like they hit every 13 feet.
Yeah.
So basically, like every 2 humans, you would light 2 humans flat on the ground, and every 2 humans there is a shell from the bomb.
Yeah, it's just wow. I didn't know that. I really didn't know that. So already the video seems quite strong because I did not know. I mean, when you stop to think about it, of course it makes sense. But yeah,
that does it. Like for me, it's unimaginable how they were able to produce so many artillery shells.
The Second World War for me, kind of, but the First World War, I really didn't know. Especially with how we know how it ended up being, so slow, so painstaking with moving forward.
And you were just sitting in those trenches and then bam, 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 all day, all night.
Yeah, Jesus, yeah.
And that's how he said. That's why they are not showing this in the movies, because you will not be able to watch the movie.
Yeah, it'd be too loud.
Yeah, only thing you're hearing is the explosions and explosions. Yeah, I'm glad we are watching this video because just this one thing is very,
it's already
very interesting.
Elaborate.
It's a common scene in many war movies. The squad is sneaking their way through a city or a forest, scanning their surroundings for enemies. Suddenly, an explosion goes off and the entire group comes under fire. As they all blast their automatic rifles back in the general direction of their enemy, one of the young men begins yelling orders, organizing and rallying his comrades into a plan of action. Except, this wouldn't be so simple in real life, and that's because guns are way louder than they appear to be in movies. You might not know this if you've never shot a firearm in real life, but not only are they loud, they are dangerously loud. Even a .22 caliber rifle, one of the smaller ones, can produce a sound reaching 140 decibels, the threshold that can cause permanent hearing damage. And keep in mind that people in the military are generally using much louder rounds than this and often firing from automatic weapons, especially in close quarters or in a place where sound can reverberate easily, such as a scene inside a car. The sound would be amplified a lot. Your ears would painfully ring, and you would have difficulty hearing anything at all for a bit, much less detailed orders being yelled by someone 20 feet away from you. This is why modern militaries not only try to wear proper ear protection, but also link their comms to it, allowing them to communicate effectively on the battlefield, even with the deafening booms of gunfire all around them. Despite this, hearing loss is still a huge issue in the world's armies and is one of the most common service-related injuries. A study performed on US soldiers returning from Iraq found that 87 reported some level of hearing disturbance, 75% reported tinnitus, a constant ringing in their ears, and that 50% had substantial hearing loss compared to peers their age. The issue is even...
I know there are worse things, but can you imagine that you have, for example, you have PTSD already, you went through all of this, and you also have tinnitus on top of that? Like, how can you recover? I know it's a small thing considering all the other disabilities you can have from the war.
Yeah,
but
still,
if you have mental health issues and you're trying to move on, but you have a ringing in your ear 24/7 that is there because the bombs are exploding next to you all the time and the guns and everything, how are you supposed to move on?
Yeah.
That's just horrifying.
Worse for people who commonly fire heavy weapons such as rocket launchers, which can be much, much louder. And now think back to the World Wars, or even the Korean War, when such great ear protection was not nearly as commonplace as it is today, and you can probably see just how damaging the whole ordeal would have been to soldiers' ears. All of this is why it's often said that the most unrealistic thing about the John Wick series is not the fact that he always survives impossible scenarios and escapes explosions unscathed, but the fact that he is not completely deaf by the end of the first movie. Movies love tanks. They're big, they're intimidating, they're heavily armed. Their arrival on the scene to back up the good guys elicits cheers from the main characters, and their showing up means that a tough battle's about to take place. But as much as movies love these armored beasts, they get quite a few things wrong about them. The most glaring of these issues is obvious to anyone familiar with tanks, and that is the fact that producers will often try to replace historical tanks with more readily available models. Slap some World War II era German symbols on whichever tank you can get your hands on, and bam, the Wehrmacht is rolling in. This is normally due to the fact that historical...
But I think that's the problem with not only tanks, with basically everything. And like, I don't know if you ever knew guys who were much into like militaria, you know, they were able to recognize guns just by the sight, which I would not be able to do.
The sound of them.
Yeah. For the sound, I never met someone who was able to do it by the sound.
I saw that, yeah.
But you know, they were always like, in this movie, it's not possible that they were using this. They were only developed in 1944, and this is 1942. So.
Well, you're making fun of it, but I think that's kind of impressive, actually. And I
mean,
it is.
If
you are making a movie, I understand it's difficult, but if you are making a movie, the scale of, I don't know, for example, Dunkirk, I don't know how accurate was that one, but you are expecting a lot of people to pay a lot of money, and you want to like educate them, then I would think that it's kind of your duty to make sure that you're showing the correct equipment.
Yeah, of course.
And not taking shortcuts,
of course.
right?
The only thing I'm saying is that, you know, it's so much easier to watch those movies without, you know,
without the knowledge. Yeah, so it's not ruined for you.
You can, you know, like be relaxed and, nice, very good.
Models are not always available, especially in large quantities for a big scene, but vehicle accuracy aside, Hollywood still tends to screw up several important things, leading to some pretty pervasive myths. The first mistake is making tanks appear far too weak, giving audiences the impression that they aren't really much of a force to be reckoned with. A great example of this is the scene from the movie White House Down, when a single rocket from an RPG destroys an approaching M1 Abrams. In reality, shooting the front armor on an Abrams is probably the worst place to aim, since it's the most protected area, and secondly, there is no way that it would have even disabled the tank, let alone have blown the entire thing sky high. On the flip side, there are some movies which give audiences the impression that tanks are essentially invincible, sustaining multiple shots from rocket launchers or even from other tanks and continuing to trudge forward. In reality, how easy a tank is to destroy depends on many factors, such as which munitions are being fired at it and where on the tank they are striking. There's also the common misconception that when a critical shot is finally landed, the tank explodes in a giant fireball. This is usually when the main character lowers whatever weapon they just used to save the day and leaves the scene as the tank carcass burns in the background. But while this certainly is a possibility, especially if the ammunition store is struck, these grandiose explosions are not always the end goal of a battle with a tank. In the Second World War, many tanks were disabled by enemy fire, either by destroying one of their tracks or causing serious damage to their engine, and they were subsequently knocked out of the fight but never exploded in a massive detonation. During the Battle of Kursk in World War II, one of the largest tank operations in history, it was difficult to estimate German tank losses from certain engagements as they made a considerable effort to tow disabled tanks off the battlefield and repair them quickly enough to be back in action after a short while. All in all, there's no doubt that it's difficult to make a good tank scene in a movie, but there are quite a few things that producers could learn to make them a bit more accurate.
Yeah, that's one thing I know about the Russia Germany war in the Second World War, that the Germans produced better tanks, like the Tigers. You heard about Tigers,
Yeah,
right?
of course, I know they had the best.
And they were the best tanks at the time.
But
the Russians were able to produce tanks much faster.
Okay, so they didn't have to waste resources trying to save the tanks because they would just leave them.
I mean, like he said, and they were also able to repair them very quickly because they were not very, but they were
Simpler.
much easier, simpler in construction. So, they were called T-54, I think, and they were considered to be the best tanks overall because of the production costs mostly.
So kind of like that video that we watched about A47, about the gun, that it was so successful because it was so easy to fix it's cheap to produce, and even though there are better ones.
Russians knew how to do something cheap and of a good quality, apparently. Who would have thought? There is this Polish TV series from the 60s, which is like enormously popular. Like everyone knows it in Poland, and it's called Four Panzermen and a Dog.
Yeah.
And that's the tank they are using. The T-54 is the Rudy, is the T-54.
For the German tank? It's the Russian tank.
Yeah, the tank that they are using, the main characters are using, is the T-54.
Okay, nice, good to know.
I hope, because if not, then I will look very stupid.
I don't think anyone from our audience has seen that show. Oh yeah, that's a common one.
By far the most prevalent inaccuracy across all war movies is the amount of ammunition expended by both sides in a firefight. You'll often see a character taking aim and firing their automatic weapon for the entire duration of the scene, running out of bullets after around 30 seconds, only to switch to their sidearm and continue shooting for the remainder of the fight. This gives the impression that in combat situations, the most effective thing to do is fire everything at your disposal in the general direction of the enemy and hope that you hit them. But it completely ignores the fact that soldiers simply don't have as much ammunition as many movies like to show. The standard soldier in most Western armies is issued 210 rounds for their rifle, carried in 7 magazines. This can vary depending on the weapon and the specific mission about to be embarked on, but this really isn't as much firepower as you'd think, especially when you consider how fast these magazines can be used up. For instance, the M4A1, the standard issue rifle for both the US Army and the US Marine Corps, fires at a rate of up to 900 rounds per minute, meaning that if you hold down the trigger without a care in the world, your magazine will be empty in just a few seconds. And because soldiers don't want to have to reload 5 seconds into a firefight, they will generally fire in short bursts, also allowing for better accuracy if the engagement is at some distance. This also goes for pistols and can be much worse on screen. One of the most commonly used pistols in movies and TV shows is the classic Colt M1911, which you'll see being fired non-stop at whichever bad guys are deserving led at that point. But the standard M1911 magazine only holds 7 rounds, giving you a total of 8 if you have one already loaded in the chamber. It's still a useful sidearm and one of the most reliable in history, but it's far from giving you 20 plus seconds of non-stop semi-automatic fire. The most egregious of these inaccuracies, though, is with revolvers. Next time you see a revolver on the silver screen, keep track of how many rounds it fires before reloading, because a surprising amount of times it will be shot a lot more than just 6.
He's out, right?
The same even goes for aircraft. After all, the famous A-10 Warthog holds just under 1,200 rounds with a blistering fire rate of 3,900 rounds per minute, so pilots tend to fire in short controlled bursts. The same goes for most other aircraft out there, with many even holding much less ammunition and having even higher rates of fire, which is definitely not the impression you'd get watching a 15-minute dogfight where both planes continuously spray bullets at each other as they twist around in the sky. And all this ignores other myths movies perpetrate about firearms, such as the fact that bullets can easily travel through water. You'll often see scenes of someone swimming with bullets cruising around them, tearing through the water as if it were air. But this isn't how it would really go, proven by none other than Mythbusters, who tested this exact scenario and found that just 3 feet of water is sufficient to disintegrate most supersonic rounds, and that after just a foot or two, the rounds will no longer be lethal. But while movies may be guilty of perpetrating many of the myths that we've covered today, let's be honest, the creative liberties taken to make the films entertaining are, at the end of the day, probably worth it.
We need to look out for the seahorses, because if the seahorses will ever go rogue and try to take over the world, we will be hopeless. Helpless, sorry.
And they're also very cute. That would be on their side as well. I really like this video. I'm
Very
really
good,
happy we
very
watched
good,
it. The last one was the only one that I could have anticipated, and I was like, oh yeah. But still, with the last one, I have never ever questioned when he said like about the dogfights. I've never questioned that because I thought, okay, yeah, plane big, plane lots of space, lots
but also what he said, the rounds per minute is much higher in planes than it is in normal guns.
Yeah, and I didn't know that 900 rounds per minute, so you're out of all of your ammunition in less than a minute. That's really
not really, because you don't have such big.
You wouldn't be able to store it. Oh yeah, he said in 7 magazines, so the most you could put in would be 30. So then you would have to use the time to reload it. Yeah, but still, yeah, but really good, right?
Yeah.
I don't know which was the fact that was the most surprising for me, but yeah, the artillery, the hearing loss as well. I mean, it's like you said at the time. Yeah, of course I know it's loud, but I didn't know.
I thought it's like a common problem, especially with the guys who are doing artillery.
Yeah.
That of course, you are hearing those loud explosions all day, but I had no idea that it's 75%.
No, me neither. And I think I didn't really think that machine guns were that loud for some reason, because I think indeed in the movies they're always quite muted. I thought, like the recoil and the sound is more of the older guns. I never thought that the machine guns are so loud you would have hearing loss just from using them. I
mean, like if you're going to the shooting range, yeah. Then you have to have mandatory, ear protections. Because
yeah. But I thought that's because it's a small space, right? And the walls are, there's the metal elements and the walls are so close. I thought that was why.
Yeah, of course, it doesn't help. But even if you are on the open space shooting range, you also have to have ear protections.
Yeah, when you stop to think about it, it's obvious. But I just never stopped to
and
think
also,
about
like you said, there are guns that are like normally when you go to shooting range, you shoot something, relatively small.
True.
And when you are on a war and there is a battle, there are tanks. Can you imagine how loud it has to be? The shot from a tank.
You're right.
And the infantry. What infantry is? Yeah. They are always in a close. They are behind the tanks, so they are close to them. So you
can hear the bullets like ricocheting and exploding and everything. Yeah, that is true.
Very good video. I really enjoyed watching it.
Me too.
Very interesting. And yeah, like you said, except the last one, which you could expect, but also it was delved deep into it. But beside the last one, the rest one was all was new.
Yeah, really good. Yeah, this guy has really good content.
And also he felt much smoother. Like in the videos that we watched before, he didn't have this like confidence that I have. I don't remember
that, but I trust that.
Is it newer? It's from 1 year ago, so maybe it's newer.
Maybe he's getting more experience indeed.
Yeah, thank you guys for watching with us. Do we have some questions or something that we wanted to ask regarding to this video?
I don't know if you have any insights, you can share them. I don't know if I had any specific questions about this.
Yeah, this time me neither.
No, because the video was just really good and it answered everything that I would like to do. But yeah, well, if you have anything to share, then of course, do so and we will read what you have to say. But yeah, really good.
What are the movies that you find most realistic when it comes to showing the military conflicts?
Yeah, maybe do you know of any movies, because he says there are almost none, but that show maybe the artillery, indeed, the use of it? Maybe there's some kind of movie?
I mean, for me, maybe like more overall, because, artillery, I don't think there is movie about artillery.
Maybe there is.
I mean, it must be a very interesting movie. But, the movie that is famous from being so historically... Accurate, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, yes. Thank you for watching with us.
Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. If you, like, subscribe, whatever you'd like to do. Bye.
Goodbye.